Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 231, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/231. You can get the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction, and you get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. David,
Monsieur.
Things these days up in the empire of evil are moving at breakneck speed. I can hardly keep up.
We are not used to this. This is like the Detroit Lions, to bring it up, because this is Super Bowl fuckhead this Sunday.
Yesterday, if you're listening to this on the day this comes out, but yes.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, I wonder what happened in the Super Bowl. Yeah, the meteorite. We're rooting for the meteorite to win. But this is like the Lions. Like, you're so used to them sucking when they came out this year and like started kicking ass. You're
went like 15-2, but like,
yes.
What?
Where the fuck weren't you like the worst team ever like 5 years ago? Like, anyway.
Well, it's been a bit in their defense. All right, the last couple of years haven't.
I like the Lions. I've always rooted for the Lions.
I know. I'm just saying it's not like they went from like 0-16 to 15-2. Like it's been building the last couple of years.
Granted, I haven't been paying as much attention to that particular league anymore.
So,
go on.
Anywho.
I've distracted us long enough.
I already know. Listen, we could bury the lead for another 2 hours and you would still know what we're talking about, because it is the talk of the town. It is on everybody's mind. And David and I have a bit of an internal rule for ourselves that it doesn't matter whether it's something that's being talked about by everybody or if it's a niche topic. We try to only talk about things if we think we have a relatively unique, not that we're the only people in the world that have a certain thought process on different topics, but if it's relatively unique, right? It's not a point that's being made about whatever the subject matter is that you're seeing everywhere, all over the news and print media, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, what we are talking about this week is the USAID scandal. And we're going to back up a couple steps before that and just get into some of the lingering questions about DOGE. But generally what we're talking about is the USAID scandal. And yes, the line items are outrageous. And yes, the American people have every right to know where their theft is going. And is it going to serve the interests of the people it was stolen from?
Taxes.
But there's something a little bit more important than that going on. And David and I are going to get to that at the end of the episode, after we discuss kind of what's going on with USAID. For those of you, for like the less than 1/2% of you that, have no idea what's going on in the world, other than the fact that you watch Weapons of Meme Destruction and we are your sole news source, in which case, good on you, mate. So with that being said,
hanging it out there, and we like that about you.
David, you got any other introductory thoughts before we hop into it?
Before we just jump right into this mother chucker? No, exactly. Not really. I mean, there's plenty of meat on the bone for this subject. It's just I want to track back to the fact that we always say, it's so funny how DC works, because whenever they name something, you can usually count pretty easily that, kind of like betting on the Chiefs would be a lock, that it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. Like USAID. You would think that, USAID, that's just aid from the U.S. No, it actually meant the U.S. had AIDS in the form of monetary aids, that we were just giving it out to hook, line, and sinker, anybody that wanted it. Just, yeah, sure, you want a loan? Apparently, we've been doing it wrong, Dane. We should have said that we were, I don't know, a lizard from, Monty Python on the Holy Grail, and we need some kind of medical advice or insurance, and they'd have thrown a couple of mil at us. Like, sure, take it.
It's kind of amazing how generous you can be when you're doing it with other people's money.
Yeah,
right?
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So anyway,
exactly.
That's just my take on it. My initial take.
So, quick outline for you listeners and viewers of how this episode is going to flow. First, we're going to talk about DOGE. Is it legal? Then we're going to talk about, generally, what is it doing? Right? For those of who may be a little bit muddied, because you get a lot of propaganda about it's this unconstitutional, illegal thing, and it's, they're just hacking into government, databases and stealing all of our personal information and blah, blah, blah. So is it legal? What's it doing? And then we're going to transition into USAID itself and say, okay, in a perfect world, if all government bureaucrats were angels, what would USAID do? And then we're going to get into what it's actually doing, some of those outrages, before we wrap up with our, what we think are relatively unique closing thoughts on the real story that's not being talked about with respect to the USAID scandal. So, first, right off the bat, is DOGE legal? The short answer is yes. And where I would direct you to on this, because again, I did look into the things that he talked about, but he lays it out really well. It's at Renz, RENZTOM, over on X. I want to give credit where it's due. He is also an attorney who looked into the executive order that Trump signed, which established DOGE, to kind of see, okay, what is the legal underpinning that makes this agency, what makes it legal, what makes it work, et cetera. And you'll be surprised. You won't be surprised. I won't be surprised. The people who, think Trump is just, flying by the seat of his pants and not looking into anything, or doesn't have a team of lawyers looking into it before he does things, will be surprised. It's actually brilliant the way DOGE is set up. So first and foremost, dispense with this talking point. No, DOGE is not a new agency. What the executive order that established it actually did was it took a pre-existing agency called the United States Digital Service, the USDS, which was already funded and created by Congress under Obamacare. Remember Obamacare? And there's an important little thing we're going to talk about at the end of this legality section. So Obamacare passed, and as a part of Obamacare, Congress also, through a federal law called 44 USCS Chapter 36, created the funding for the USDS, the United States Digital Service. And the ostensible purpose of the USDS was to ensure government efficiency, right? Through the lens of software development and IT. So basically what it did is Congress said, okay, here's money for the USDS, and you're going to have access to the government agencies that oversee Obamacare to make sure that the money coming in is efficiently distributed and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, sounds good as far as it goes. So what Trump did is he took USDS, so he did not create a new agency. He took USDS, and as is his authority as the executive, the commander-in-chief, he sets all policy goals and objectives for the entire executive branch. So what he did is he kept USDS, and he said, I'm going to repurpose your function. You're still going to be looking at software, and you're still going to be doing it through the lens of IT, but I want you to take your efficiency mandate, and I want you to apply it to every executive branch, not just internally within Obamacare. And so he renamed the United States Digital Service to the United States DOGE Service. Clever, right? So any sort of legal challenge that Trump created a new agency without congressional approval and he's not allowed to do that and blah, 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 has been completely cut off at the knees. Because again, it's not a new agency, already previously established. Congress has already appropriated funds for it. So that's the first kind of brilliant little move. The second thing that Trump appealed to in his executive order is another federal law, 5 USC 3161, which is a federal law that allows for the hiring and staffing of government positions. And so what Trump did is he appealed to that federal law and said, again, setting policy for the executive branch, but in so doing, he did not create his own unique administrative agency. Again, this cuts off the potential for lawsuits against DOGE. Is he said, I'm going to demand that every single executive agency, again, they all work for him, every single executive agency needs to hire a DOGE team that consists of a team lead, a lawyer, an HR person, and an engineer. So the team lead is responsible for the overall policy of government efficiency. The lawyer is to make sure that whatever they're doing is legal. The HR person is the person who can hire and fire and make personnel decisions. And then the engineer is the one that's really doing the nitty-gritty. They're the ones that are using the software and the IT tools to expose to us what DOGE has exposed to us, the American people, so far. And so, again, the entire staffing of DOGE teams, when you hear the left lose their minds about, oh my God, these unconstitutional, nobody people from DOGE that shouldn't have access to whatever. Yes, Trump was allowed to hire them and create those teams according to 5 USC 3161. So they are government employees in that sense, just like anybody else. And then finally, or actually I may have already said this, but just to reiterate in case I didn't, Trump ordered all executive agencies to support DOGE's mission. And finally, the last brilliance of this whole thing is he disclaimed all prior executive orders. Now, remember the executive order discussion we had a couple episodes ago about the difference between EOs and pardons is pardons are irreversible, but executive orders can be changed at will by every successive incoming executive administration. So Trump ordered all executive agencies to hire let the DOGE team into your headquarters, support their function, which is government efficiency, and all other executive orders which you might raise to try to stop DOGE or put up any roadblocks are hereby disclaimed. So you can't interfere with what DOGE is doing. So that's sort of the 50,000-foot, 5-minute overview. It is, again, I'm as a lawyer, right? Everything, the entire function of a lawyer is you're living life in the gray. So I'm not going to say that there won't be any challenges to DOGE. Of course there will. But for the most part, the entire way it was set up and the way it's operating is legally bulletproof.
It sounds like he made DOGE the IRS for the government. A little bit. If I could just take it and dole all that last 10 minutes of diatribe down into that.
Was it really 10 minutes? I tried to be brief.
It's okay. That is brief. For you, that is pretty brief for breaking down a subject. But no, yeah, I mean, that's pretty ingenious. And it's like God's finally smiting those that need to be smited for once. It's a breath of fresh air. And it's funny to see how the government likes taking its own medicine for once. Did they, by the way, or is that enough explanation that we can get into the... Okay,
yeah, that's the end of the is it legal section. Yes,
so
that's the answer, yes.
Then I'm going to take it into my domain and go with just human behavior. Can we go there for a second? So,
absolutely.
So from all that explanation, let's create a scenario, Dane. Let's say you baked a batch of cookies, okay? And they're for a very specific reason. You're taking them to a party that you had later on that night. And let's just say that all of a sudden a couple of those cookies go missing. And there was a very specific number of cookies that you needed to have for this party, and now they're missing. Interesting, right? So now you start an investigation into your house. And one of your kids says, I don't care, I don't give a crap. And then another one of your kids says, I don't care, I don't give a crap. And then your last kid says, you shouldn't do that. And meanwhile, he has chocolate all over his face. So, by power of deduction, Dane, who do you think took those motherfucking cookies? I don't think it was the first two kids.
I'm going to go with kid 3.
So, and then what was that?
Limb. Totally out on a limb with that one.
And now I'm going to backtrack to bring it to not even current day. But let's go back into 2001. What was the famous phrase when they started rolling out all these ideas about Homeland Security and about the Patriot Act and about all these things that we knew that we signed off? Well, we didn't sign off on it. Our representatives did. That our representatives signed off on. What were we constantly saying about that? Weren't we saying the phrase, well, I have nothing to hide. I don't care if they get into every little facet of my thing because I have nothing to hide. So I have nothing to fear, right?
Right.
So...
Or that's what they said to us so that we didn't look too much under the hood.
That's what we would parrot. And then we'd say, oh, well, I've got nothing to hide except for all my Google searches after 11 p.m. Anyway, that's not the point. I get distracted. Now we're fast forwarding. So now it's their turn for us to look at, like you said, the money that we give them through theft or coercion every year, which we call taxes in this country. Now we're going to finally get to see what they've been spending our money on. And they don't want us to. And they're kicking up a storm. And this, that, and the other. And before we even get into this subject, didn't DOGE ask the USAID to audit them? Correct? Before, and then the USAID said no, right?
Yeah, with all these federal agencies, they say, hey, we're going to come in and do what this executive order established us to do. And some agencies were more obstreperous than others. USAID was one of them, was like, no, you're not coming into the facility, you're not looking, blah, blah, blah. Yes.
And then DOGE went, oh, yeah, we are. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this real easy. And they chose the real easy way to just be shut down. And then the wailing and gnashing of teeth. And again, I'm just going to bring up one. Well, we'll get into it, and then I'll bring up the how I think that the government has been this country's toxic girlfriend for about the last forever. So anyway, putting all that aside, so what does that tell you with the analogy, the cookie analogy? It means that they don't want you to see it. They don't want you to see exactly. Right. And if you had nothing to hide, of course, here's my books. And that's what we would expect of our leadership, because with great power comes great responsibility. We've all seen Spider-Man. So so you guys have been telling us for decades and decades, like, don't worry. Behind this curtain, we're doing everything that you would want us to do. Can we see behind No, you fuckhead. You can't see behind the curtain, but trust us.
And if you do, you're probably a domestic terrorist, right? If you even want to see behind the curtain.
Right. How dare you? How dare you question your government? Are you not American? Are you not a patriot? Fuck you. No, anyway, so go ahead.
And exactly, and we said this, in our analysis after the election and all that kind of stuff, that Trump was going to have to do a lot of policy setting from his desk with executive orders, as opposed to the Schoolhouse Rock version of government, right, where Congress passes laws, the executive enforces them, and then the judicial branch interprets them. That's the way, in a perfect world, that we would like for it to function. That's the way the United States government by our founders was set up to function. But unfortunately, the bastardization of it from years and years and years has been to collectively push more and more authority over to the executive branch of the government so that Congress can just throw up their hands, pretend like they're being really upset about whatever the current president's doing without ever really having to be held responsible by the voters for what they do. And so that's really kind of the beauty of this whole thing. And we talked about this on the episode right after the Trump election, that we weren't as principled libertarians particularly enthused about the idea of a president having so much, power that they can do all of this through executive orders, but we knew it had to be done. And the only reason it had to be done is because that's exactly the way, not just the other side, not just Democrats and leftists, but everybody who thinks that the federal government is legitimate and it should have more power and it should whip the states in line and all that kind of stuff for decades have been doing this, collecting all of this power in the executive branch. And it's just so much a matter of cosmic justice, serendipity, whatever you want to call it. It's so beautiful that the agency that this is being done under was an Obamacare created agency, especially when you have that famous quote from Obama talking about Obamacare, that if Congress didn't get in line and do what he told them to do, then he has his pen and his phone. Well, you reap what you sow. For all of the people that are absolutely losing their minds about what DOGE is doing and how it came to be, just know you created and agitated for a whole time such a vigorous and strong executive branch is the terms that they would always put in. We need a vigorous and strong executive to accomplish blah, 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 because sometimes the people are too stupid to send the right amount of elected representatives over here to Congress to get X, Y, or Z law passed. So let's just have one individual strong man legislate through executive orders. Again, that's the bastardized system we have. I'm not any happier about it than anybody else, but I am happy that finally, for once in our lives, that bastardized system is being used against the deep state, the people that have been operating against our interests for all of these years. Finally, it's being used in a direction that is in the favor of the American people. And, I'm just happy about that. But again, it's just such a high degree of cosmic justice that it came about because of the exact mechanisms that they put into place, thinking that they were never going to lose control to somebody like Trump, who is an outsider and has no skin in the game, to be able to say, listen, you guys fucked this shit up for the last 50 years. I'm just going to use your own tools against you. So it's beautiful the way it worked out.
I just kind of want to reiterate something that I was discussing with one of my friends this week. I kind of came to a realization that, it would have taken, like you just mentioned, the intricate work that they put in to make these mechanisms. It literally would have taken a Trump to they couldn't predict Trump, is what I'm saying. It's like they had the game so set up that obviously anybody that ever got to run for president was so compromised by the time that they got there that they were bought and paid for. So, like we say on the podcast all the time, like it's the WWE out there. They're a Republican or a Democrat in name only. They all agree on all the issues that are two-party issues, like war, making money inside, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, yada yada, you name it. It would have taken somebody like an outsider that had the initiative and the wherewithal or the ability to fund themselves and then break through all the glass ceilings that they had for such a candidate to get through. And then once he got in there, he would have to know
and nothing
how
to lose for the truth coming out.
Correct. Yeah. And then the only thing that he really has, if you really break it down, he doesn't have another term, despite what the wailing and gnashing on the teeth on the left are, that he's going to stay. He's never going to leave. He's going to be a dictator. He only has 4 years. And all that he has the money. He doesn't have to, he has his own retirement plan. He doesn't have to make any more money. It seems like all he has to do, or all his incentive is to be the best president ever. Which, I mean, go for it, dude. I don't give a shit. Like, that's really what's driving this. And it's just so, like you said, cosmically just. It's cosmically just that all these mechanisms, like we said on the podcast all the time too, you're not always going to be in power, and the door's going to swing back twice as hard. So you better wield that power with a little restraint. Yeah. What a concept. Yeah. Have a little respect for your foe, because sometimes they might be in power, and the same people you see on the way up are the same people you see on the way down. So it's just kind of like you said. I can't think of anything better than the cosmic irony that now that the one thing that could undo all these mechanisms is now in there and is undoing all these mechanisms, and they are losing their minds over it. It's beautiful. To be honest with you.
So last thing on DOGE before we get into the USAID part of the discussion today is, okay, so what is it doing? And so for this, I want to direct you to another X user. Her name is Andrea James. It's ANDREAS James. That's the @ to go find her. And she has been in the corporate world for a long time in the accounting sphere, and she kind of lays it out really well. I'm not going to go through her entire analysis. It would take quite a while, but basically what she says DOGE is doing, which I think is accurate, is what's called in the corporate world zero-based budgeting, or ZBB. She's like, listen, every company that does this hates it. It's the worst thing in the world, but it's kind of like taking your medicine. Because as we know, in the private sector, where you operate on profit and loss, if your company is just hemorrhaging money, that can't go on forever, or else you cease to exist as an entity. You need to make sure from time to time that you check everything from top to bottom and make sure that you're being efficient, and so you're not wasting money. As we know, government doesn't have to do that because it has the power of legalized extortion in the form of taxes, or legalized theft in the term of money printing, stealing the value of your dollar through inflation. So it doesn't respond to these profit and loss, incentives the way a private business does. But basically what zero-based budgeting is kind of like the name sounds. You bring in a team of accountants and auditors, and you just strip everything in the company. And when I say everything, I mean everything. You strip it down to the bone, and you go to every department within that company, and you make them line by line justify every dollar they spend. The office management, segment of the company needs to be able to explain why they bought that packet of napkins, right? Every single thing needs to be justified. And by doing that, you find out where the waste is, and then you put back the things that are absolutely justified by, the audit and is necessary for the function of the business, and nothing more. So you streamline everything by stripping it down to the bones and then rebuilding back only what you need. That's what DOGE is doing to the government. And so it's important to keep that in mind when you see all of the outrage happening, because yes, there is a bit of Wizard of Oz, like David was saying, aspect to it of no, don't look behind the curtain because, we're doing bad shit back here. But it's like, why, when you understand that the government doesn't have profit and loss incentives and can always just steal more money from you, why would they be so outraged about, the very first ever in American history zero-based budgeting effort of the government to find out where there is waste? Let's assume none of the bad, evil motives, right? And let's just assume that, when you got $4 trillion a year sloshing around in terms of money stolen from the American people, there can be some, avenues for waste or just mismanagement of those funds. Humans are fallible after all. So why so outraged that it's being stripped down to the bones to show the people that are supposed to be in control of this thing, the American people, to show us where the waste is happening so that when we put back, it's only those essential functions that the government needs to be able to act in the interest of the American people and not to the literally hundreds of thousands or millions of grifters that are stealing trillions of dollars from us, to fund their lavish lifestyle.
So to condense that again, how could this be a bad thing?
Right.
From a just a general member of the population that's been a member of the population all his life, all I've ever heard is like, well, Washington's corrupt. What are you going to do? And then back to their job. Like, now there's something being done, and one side in particular is not very happy that it's being done. It doesn't make you look. It's like a constant reiterating of the fucking meme is like, are we the baddies? Like, you guys keep doing the bad thing and just being like, no, this isn't, God, this is how it works up here. You don't know how business works. It's like, no, I do. And that's not supposed to be how it is. So
yeah. It's funny when they
fraud.
start screeching like, oh, Elon doesn't know anything. They don't know how government
how
runs.
DC works. So yeah, exactly.
It's like,
no.
motherfuckers, you don't know how it runs.
It might be how it works, but it's not supposed to be how it works. That's the issue, motherfucker.
You just know that magic money falls out of the sky into one of your nonprofits and that you're getting to live your, lavish lifestyle on it. You don't know how it gets there, but you're just happy it keeps coming in.
Yeah. You don't want, it's like the heroin addict. He doesn't want the good times to stop rolling,
Don't
you can make this work.
Rolling, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So all right. So now on to USAID, and let's set aside the waste, fraud, and abuse, the evil motives for a second. We're not excusing it. We're getting to it. Just that's coming later. And let's just assume for a second that they're all perfect angels. Inside the entire U.S. government, but inside USAID specifically. And so what was USAID supposed to do? It's USAID, for those of you who don't know, stands for the United States Agency for International Development. And it's supposed to, in theory, take money
develop
appropriated to it by Congress to give to projects around the world that advance the interests of America. So America has certain foreign policy, designs and plans that aren't always 100% tied to the military. And so there is hard diplomacy, which is things like do what we say or we're sending in the troops. And then there's soft diplomacy like, hey, here's some money to kind of build up this sector of your society. And we think it's going to be pro-Western, pro-United States, blah, blah, blah. Now, let's just assume that that's a completely unobjectionable, impossible to misappropriate goal for USAID. Well, Ron Paul had a great quote about what foreign aid is in general, whether it's from the US to China or, France to Germany. All foreign aid is it's stealing from the poor people in rich countries to give to rich people in poor countries. That's it. That's what it's doing.
To counter that point,
even if you went through the USAID budget and said, okay, I don't have any issues with any of these line items, it's still being stolen from American middle and lower class taxpayers so that they can fund wealthy people in, other countries that the United States wants to do X, Y, or Z.
And then Elon brought up a good point too, is name a country that taxes their people and then sends it to us. I'll wait. Like that's the kit and caboodle. And right. This is fine. This is fine to do. You can send, and we'll get in. I'm sure we'll get into the line items momentarily. But if we lived in a utopia and every single member, 400, we'll just round it up and say 400 million Americans were living a very comfortable life, middle class, can get every amenity that they ever wanted. We're living in paradise on earth. Then we can start sending $2 million
and not running deficits to do it.
Sure. Yeah. And then we've got more money than we know what to do with. Right. So then you can start spending on, I don't know, DEI initiatives down in Panama, fucking DEI initiatives in India, like getting some propaganda here, disfunding misinformation in fucking Kazakhstan, whatever the fuck we were spending our money on, that would be fine. But North Carolina still needs to be rebuilt. Hawaii still needs to be rebuilt. East Palestine, Flint, Michigan, are they even still alive? Because their water's been fucked forever. We've got problems here, man. We got some issues. So that's. I just wanted to interject there and say
exactly. So, kind of the first shot across the bow that Elon put out on X when they first started digging into USAID is he found that they had never once denied a single funding request, even to individuals and entities, organizations that were known to either be engaged in fraud or were terrorist organizations. So, just to kind of simplify that even more, I think that's pretty simple, but even more. Let's say, and I'm sure probably wings of it are, they're just named like, Organization for Happy People in Iran or whatever.
Yeah.
But let's say Al-Qaeda, again, a known terrorist organization says, we want money to, spade and neuter our goats because there's too many goats over here. So, we got to get this population under control. USAID
we got
would not deny those funds.
We got you.
So
you know what I'm hearing, Dane? You know what I'm hearing? Dane? The WMD boys fucked up.
Yeah.
We should have gone to USAID and been like, we need money. And they would have been like, we got you. Wait a second.
As a matter of fact,
we might have been the only people who got denied because they'd review our fucking shit. They're like, we're not giving you money.
We could have gone to USAID and said that the WMD in our name stands for We Have Weapons of Mass Destruction. They probably would have still given us money.
I like them. I like their character.
They got a lot of panache, those boys over there at WMD.
They got a way about them. I don't know what it is. It's a je ne sais quoi.
So again, assuming not evil motives, like that's a problem. Right? If they know for a fact that you're engaged in fraud or in terrorism and they're still giving you money, that's a problem. And keep in mind that as you hear all of the headlines about the really crappy line items like transgender surgeries in South Africa and stuff like that, like USAID gets about $40 billion got about $40 billion a year from the United States or appropriated to it by Congress. That's like less than 1% or about 1%. Of the entire United States federal budget. So if we're finding all of this stuff on 1%, just imagine what's going on in the other 99%.
Who was that chick from MSNBC that, that was her point. Like she was talking to, God damn it, I forgot who it was, but she was interviewing somebody that was going over these line items and shit like that. And she's like, isn't this, I mean, even if you do mention that, isn't this like a very small percentage of the American taxpayer dollars that are going to all
these? She thought she was making a great point.
Oh,
with
yeah.
that.
It's like, I'm sorry. What
you realize
did you
that helps
say?
My side, right?
Right. You fucking moron. Like you said the quiet part out loud. Like, wait until we get to the other stuff. I'm sure it's going to be just fine. This is the only agency. This is the first scratch on the tip of the surface that they looked into and they found all this corruption. I'm sure it'll be way better down the road when there's agencies that get way more money. Oh, I don't know, like the military industrial complex.
Like the Pentagon that has failed every audit since I think for the last 7 years, or maybe may have never passed.
They've never passed one. No. They've
we're
never
talking
passed
about
one.
$1 trillion budgets.
So that'll get real fucking interesting, real fucking quick. But go ahead.
Exactly. So anyway, I want to get into some of the kind of overarching things. The two things I really want to focus on is how is this whole thing set up, this kind of Rube Goldberg web of money flowing, of our money flowing to the worst people in the world, and then the whole journalism angle. So the first thing is how it's set up. I'm going to share with you a couple tweets from a guy over on X. The Twitter handle is it's at Data Republican, and then his name is Data Republican, and then he says small r in lowercase, meaning not Republican Party, just republicanism as a form of government. So I encourage you to follow at Data Republican because I haven't confirmed yet whether or not he's a member of the DOGE team, but he releases information very fast about what DOGE is doing, sort of Elon's promise to be transparent, very fast and in intricate detail. So if he's not one of the engineers on the DOGE team, he knows the people that are because he releases some really important stuff. So Bill Kristol, and for our non-US listeners and maybe many of our US listeners that have no idea who he is, like Bill Kristol is the neocon's neocon. He has, he was, I believe, the secretary or the chief staffer for Dan Quayle when he was the vice president under H.W. Bush. Like he is the sort of establishment, never Trump Republicans that are, neocon, never saw a war they didn't like or whatever. And so Bill Kristol has been like front and center for setting the old guard Republican, narratives about constantly going to war, cheered on the Iraq wars. And like, that's who Bill Kristol is. And so Bill Kristol had a tweet where he said, the deep state is far preferable to the Trump state. Again, you got to be a really stupid or really evil person to say that. But again, I repeat myself because I just told you who Bill Kristol is. Anyway, so Data Republican replied to that with some information that he had just recently learned about USAID. He said, quote, hello, Mr. Kristol. For you, the deep state is preferable because you are listed as the president of Defending Democracy. And then he provides the EIN tax number for the nonprofit. He says, quote, which is an indirect beneficiary of USAID through Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. You are exposed. And then he shows the web of how the money has flowed. And here's a closer up of a chart where Data Republican says, here's a teaser. This is what the Network for Defending Democracy Together Institute looks like. The graph represents grants from various USAID-affiliated NGOs flowing to Kristol's nonprofit. And so what he has there in all the bubbles are the EINs for all of the different agencies. But again, this is the beauty of DOGE. Because it's looking at efficiency through the lens of software and IT, that's what they're doing. They're going into these agencies and they're tracking with algorithms that they're creating where is all the money going so that they can create charts like this. And suffice it to say, for the audio-only listeners, you want to come check out the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or X.
It's really intricate.
It's bad.
Yeah.
So again, just this data point alone, let's just strip away all the names and the rhetoric or whatever. If I showed this picture to you and I said, this is how your tax dollars are flowing, alarm bells should be ringing in your ear to say, that seems to be overly complex to a point that it's intentional, such that whoever is the end recipient doesn't want, again, a standard auditor that's just looking at the entity at the bottom of the graph. So Bill Kristol's entity is able to track where all the money's flowing to. And if that's the thing, like that's the proverbial curtain, that's the proverbial, I want to see behind this thing to see what's going on. So again, that's why I really encourage people to follow Data Republican over on X, because if he's not a member of the DOGE team, he's releasing great stuff like that on a nearly constant basis that is really exposing all of the lies around this whole thing about what DOGE is up to and what they're finding.
Right. I mean, I don't know how, again, to bring it back to logic and reason. When you see a very powerful person with a lot of money saying that they'd rather have something that we as American people have all agreed that is a bad thing, i.e. the deep state, and that's what's really been running this country for however long, and yada, yada, yada. And that's how we agree that the common man is being downtrodden upon to raise up more and more powerful people, less and less powerful people with more and more power. So again, literally having Bill Kristol come on and say the deep state is better than Trump is literally saying I'm rooting for Jason in this movie.
Yeah, it's
I don't want any of the teenagers. I
moment.
don't want any of the teenagers to get out. I want to see all their heads on spits. Like you're literally rooting for the monster. And guess what? You are the monster too, because like you said, he was very much getting paid. So again,
yeah.
And speaking of people getting paid, and speaking of this, that, and the other, going to corruption. This is how you get, and this is extrapolating it out, taking it back to 35,000 feet. This little microcosm of USAID is how you get the hypocrisy of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders questioning RFK whether or not he's going to get paid by fucking pharmaceutical companies. This is how you do that, and no one bats an eye when they do. Well, they do, but they're never heard because they're on, independent media like us. We scream and shout into the wind that it takes people to research and put Twitter notes on and so on and so forth, that Bernie got paid $1.2 million back when he bent the knee for Clinton. He got paid that directly by not directly, but
to his campaign. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which I don't know where that goes.
Which I'm sure the chart for that looks probably pretty similar to what I just showed you.
Yeah, refer back to that chart that we just saw you. But anyway, and then Elizabeth Warren got paid 5.2 or 5.3 million. She's sitting on that, and she's sitting there questioning him. And then, fun little side note, I believe it was this week, or it might have been back on the 30th. I don't remember. But Elizabeth Warren was quoted as saying, it's not in the Constitution for us to tell regular Americans what their taxpayer dollars are spent on.
Which, again, is another mask-off moment.
I don't know how Pocahontas, what tomahawk she has to hit you over the head with for you to realize she ain't on your side, and she does not view herself as one of you. Regular Americans. She
rules and you are ruled. That's her paradigm.
Go. She's the real American. You're just a regular one. Yeah. Kind of like back in COVID when they were saying that you're essential, you're not essential. Like, you're one of us, you're not one of us. Again, go ahead.
Two things on that. First of all, 95% of all government agencies are not explicitly authorized by the Constitution, and many of them are unconstitutional. So that's not exactly a principled position she's taking that she applies across the board. Her view is, as long as it's created, period, it's constitutional, I don't care. But that's not how it works. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But setting even that aside, let's just get to a moralistic perspective of that statement, right? Remember when we talked about at the beginning of the episode, again, the Schoolhouse Rock version of the United States American political experiment is it's a government of, by, and for the people. So regardless of what the Constitution commands her as an elected representative to tell us about what's being done with our money, if she held fast to that principle that democracy is about expressing the views of the people, then it doesn't matter if the Constitution commands her to be transparent about where our money goes. She should feel it's her duty and obligation as somebody elected to represent her constituents that they get that transparency.
To serve them.
Because how could we actually be the rulers and commanders of the government as we're supposed to be if we don't know where our money's going, right? So again, her point is not even a point. It doesn't even stand up against a simple logical pushback. But it is a mask-off moment in the sense that it tells you exactly the way she and people of her ilk think about you, the average American. You are just a tax cow to be milked until you keel over and die. And then when you keel over and die, if you had anything left to give to your progeny, that's also going to get taxed. So that's the way she views it. And so this whole idea when they get up on the dais and they start talking about they want this policy or this new agency or this new law and regulation and it's going to protect the people, refer back to this statement from her and see if you believe her about the new thing that she wants to do is really in your interest.
I've got a newsflash for you. It ain't. So, you want to go through a couple of line items or do you want to just push on with this topic?
I got two more of the overarching things. Okay. Is another big one is, and I guess this could be, this is a line item, is they found that USAID, again, try to keep the alphabet soup straight. USAID is the agency, but NIAID, which was the agency that Fauci was running, USAID gave NIAID a $40 million stipend that money flowed to scientists in Wuhan that were doing coronavirus research in a lab, and a member of that Wuhan staff is who actually ended up becoming patient zero. But here's the real kicker. That money was originally funded in when? 2014. Does that name ring a bell to anybody from a couple episodes ago? That Fauci's preemptive pardon was backdated to January 1st,
there are two other
2014.
Pardons. There are two other pardons that came through at that time too, right?
Yeah.
A specific date.
Yeah. Also, Hunter's January 1st, 2014 start date for his pardon.
And subsequently, his own pardon for himself too, correct? Was that
correct?
Was that not also a
part I don't think Joe specifically pardoned himself. I don't know if he needed to, because again, if he gets all of his co-conspirators like Hunter and Fauci off the hook, and they're the ones that were actually doing the illegal shit, then the chain can't be connected back to Joe himself, right? They would have to go after Joe individually for what Joe did and not link him to his co-conspirators' actions. So there's no reason to pardon himself. That's what I was thinking.
Nothing to see here, guys. I mean, so you could say that he didn't pardon himself, but that he did.
Right, exactly. In a roundabout way.
Yeah.
It's just less as ostentatious.
I didn't cheat on you. I had a condom on. It wasn't there was no actual contact.
Right. So again, when you hear the screeching coming out about people not wanting you to look behind the curtain, I want you to keep in mind these facts. Again, this is not a conspiracy theory. These are facts that we learned because DOGE dug into USAID.
Where's Peter Griffin when you need him? These are facts.
Just to lay out the timeline for you one more time. Fauci was heading up NIAID. That organization got a $40 million grant from USAID in 2014. Fauci started funding the research of coronaviruses at Wuhan in 2014. And guess when the date of that research was to be completed. You guessed it, in 2019. Now, that $40 million funded that research from 2014 to 2019. Scientists in Wuhan becomes patient zero. It gets out. We have all of the COVID, blah, blah, blah. And then fast forward to 2025 on January 20th, Fauci gets a preemptive pardon for everything that was done. Now, those data points about where the money come from and what it was for and all that kind of stuff is only what we learned because of DOGE. So, again, keep that detail in mind when you hear them talk about how many millions of people that died because of COVID, and COVID was this and COVID was that, and you're not essential, and you need an experimental drug injected in your arm, and all of this kind of stuff. Look through that entire narrative, everything that we experienced, through the lens of where the money came from and how we learned about all of this. Again, if Trump was never elected, if DOGE never happened, we would have still been in conspiracy theory land talking about the U.S. government funding the research over there instead of known hardcore facts about where the money came from and what it was doing. Keep that in mind moving forward for the rest of, your days on this earth.
Yeah. It's just, fuck, man. It just seems like so. You don't even have to logic this to death. Dane, would you consider yourself a very, very intelligent person, not a genius? Dane Wise?
Sorry, the camera kind of cut out and you paused on me. I didn't catch that. Would I consider myself what?
A genius. Like a high IQ, like super, like way up there.
I mean, I'm probably average, right? Like most people.
I'm
not
put
Einstein level, no.
I put myself a little below average. But I don't think that you have to be a genius to just logic this one right down that road. So what I will say is I'm going to shine a light on what's been going on this week in the wailing and gnashing of teeth of Elizabeth Warren, of who's the Democratic one with the gigantic eyelashes from Texas?
Jasmine Crockett?
Yeah, that's the one. Hey, see? I'm telling you. Taboo, I'm a fucking killer. Anyway.
Oh my God.
I'm telling you.
I can't believe that I got that right on the giant eyelashes thing.
Oh, baby girl, don't play. Oh, baby girl, don't play. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny that they're saying that, and then think of the people that are losing their jobs and they're breaking this and that. I don't know how to say this anymore. For the longest time, DC has been the toxic girlfriend of the American people in this country. And what do I mean by that? They're so concerned, like Dane had to go through, they're so concerned that we had to start this episode off with Dane literally going line by line of how DOGE is legal. Okay? So we had to backtrack all the way back there to go make sure that take all the necessary steps to where, we can get that out of the way, because all this week you've heard from the Democratic Party, this is not how this is tyranny. This is wrong. This is not the way democracy works. And then we find all this out. We find all the DEI bullshit that they've been pushing in multiple other countries to the tune of millions of dollars, plays that were, meant to LGBTQ role, like tons of stuff, millions and millions of dollars. And they're more concerned about they audited us. That shouldn't have been able to happen. Not not the fact that we found all of this nonsense that shouldn't have been happening, just that we're upset that they looked at it, which should have been legal anyway. My point is, what that's like, for another analogy, that's like your girlfriend screaming at you for going through her phone, but you found 20,000 dick pics in it. Just saying, like, yeah, but no, that's not the issue. That's not the issue. You broke my trust. And that's irrevocable. I can't believe you did. No. The reason you're making that big of a deal out of me getting into your phone is the simple fact that you want to distract from the fact that there's 20,000 dick pics in your phone, and I've only gone through the first 5 goddamn names in your phone. So let's go through this. The reason I'm making that analogy is this is the playbook, Dan. This is how they get away with it every time. This is how they get away with the Jeffrey Epsteins. They make it all about, these poor girls that were taken advantage of. Like, that's important, yes. Those girls. But the real story was all the people that were compromised, and how Jeffrey Epstein, it's okay to say it now, was probably Mossad. And that Ghislaine Maxwell's
I don't think it's even probably anymore. I'm pretty sure it's confirmed.
Yeah, it's all. Maybe. This is all confirmed. But nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. Oh, those poor girls. Let's make a documentary of Epstein, but we'll make it about the girls. Like, don't make it about Bill and Melinda Gates, or Bill Gates and his fund and all that good stuff, or all the people that were on the island, Clinton. Yada, no. The girls. That's what's happening here. They're so caught that the only thing that they can do is blame you for catching them in a way that they didn't like it. And then it'll get pushed down the road. You'll argue with your friends about, no, well, DOGE shouldn't even exist. And they'll argue back because they think you get caught up on that issue, that you are distracted from the fact that the corruption's right there.
Yeah.
And this is the playbook. And all I'm saying is, don't fall for that. Focus on the goal. Keep your eye on the prize.
Right.
So,
right.
That's
and here's sort of the last thing. It's definitely not the last, but it's the last big thing that we learned before we get into our closing thoughts is the control of media in general. There was reports that came out that USAID funds from USAID had been sent to news agencies like the BBC, the New York Times, and in particular Politico, which, now we're told that, oh, no, they really weren't. But it's just highly coincidental that within, I think, 24 hours of USAID getting shut down, Politico could no longer pay their entire staff.
Why was that, Dave?
Maybe that's just a coincidence of timing. I don't know. I'm told not to look too closely at that. But again, that's a problem. And I have one more X account for you to follow. Again, I'm just a wealth of cool people to follow for you here today on this episode. The name of the Twitter is Insurrection Barbie, and it is at Defiantly Free, DEFIYANTLYFREE. And she had this data from the Columbia Journalism Review. She said, according to the Columbia, like the university in New York City, Columbia University, the Columbia Journalism Review, USAID supported 6,200 journalists, 707 news outlets, and 279 media sector civil society organizations in 30 different countries.
Ooh.
Now, again, Here's the outrage about that. And this gets into, and our closing thoughts about the whole thing is what CNN would prefer you to get mad about is that they were doing transgender surgeries for people in South Africa, or that they were spending $100 million on condoms for people in Gaza, or, go down your laundry list of the line items. Yes, that's outrageous. Your taxes should not be being spent on that, especially when, as David said, North Carolina, Hawaii, East Palestine, Ohio, Flint, all of those problems still exist. Crumbling infrastructure that they're always whining about. Yes, money should not be spent on those other things until the things here at home are taken care of. I grant you that. That's a problem. But much with the Epstein thing, and that they only wanted you to focus on the girls, the mainstream narrative, again, as sad as that part of the story is that's where they want you to stop. And they don't want you to go the next step. Here's what they did to you, the average American, and really to all around the world when you're talking about 707 news outlets in 30 different countries. So even our listeners in the down under, right? Even in your country, right? They stole money from the American people so that they could, the whole COVID thing, right? They engaged in the creation of a bioweapon that they then used to steal the rights, freedoms, and liberties of people all around the country, no matter what the people in those countries wanted done, or what even their government officials wanted to do. That's one thing. But then they also stole your money to destroy your mind, to propagandize you. When you're talking about 707 news outlets across 30 different countries, is it any wonder that the news always sounds to be speaking from a script? When something that any part of that somebody that's not a part of the establishment says, when Joe Rogan says, I took ivermectin, or when Trump says, I'm going to hold up these weapons to Ukraine until they investigate what the Bidens were doing in Ukraine, and all of the refrains from all the major news outlets all around the world all sound the same. And up until we learned this new thing, that was just something that the conspiracy theorists were worried about. But now you know. It's not just that they steal money from you, making it harder and harder every single day for you to keep a roof over your head and to feed your family. But they then turn around and use that money to brainwash you and people all around the world, to propagandize you to always support whatever they're doing, namely keeping slush funds flowing to all of their nonprofits and NGOs. And they're making sure that you never see it or look at it. And if you do, you're probably a domestic terrorist if you want to know. That's the real story here. It's not just the transgender surgeries and the DEI stuff. It's the fact that they weaponized your money. It would be bad enough if they stole 30% of your paycheck and lit it on fire. It's that they took that money and they used it against you. In some cases, violently. When you talk about the USAID funding CIA operations all around the countries to engage in literal insurrections and coups to topple governments, that is completely unconstitutional and against the will of the people in those foreign countries. That's what this money was going for. That's what they did. And that's why they are losing their fucking minds that you're finding out about it. So again, keep your eye on the prize. The line items are bad, but pay attention and be very, very righteously indignant and upset about what they use that money to do to you, to your freedoms, to your mind, and to the ability for you to provide for your kids and a better world for your kids tomorrow. That's what they did. And never forget it.
Well, if I may be so bold, Dan, to be selfish in this regard. So, again, seeing as they have no problem going up against the grain, or the Trump administration I'm referring to, seeing as they have no trouble going up against the grain and putting all these people, Politico and USAID and all, challenging, bucking the system, bucking the narrative, bucking the norm of how business is done in Washington. Thank you, Chuck Schumer. Or not. Yeah, it is Schumer. Yeah. Again, it feels like this is the perfect time to deep dive into not just the assassinations of MLK, RFK, and JFK, but let's start talking about the POW issue. Maybe we should get in the ear. Maybe DOGE should look into, is the CIA on the docket to be audited by any chance? Is the FBI on the docket? Because we're going to go through the Pentagon. He said that we're going through the Pentagon. There has to be papers in there too. So,
like I said, according to the executive order, every single executive branch agency is compelled by the boss, by the big man at the top of all of them,
Jesus Christ,
to
power of Christ compels you
to take in a DOGE team and do what the DOGE team says to do. If the DOGE team wants to look at X, Y, or Z file or function or whatever, then they're supposed to be able to do it. So
let's get it, DOGE.
Yeah.
Let's DOGE the fuck out of the POW issue, and let's get some goddamn answers for these families that have been torn apart by this goddamn government and how business is done in Washington for however many decades that they have been. So let's finally get some answers for these people. That's all I got to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the selfish core functions of the creation of this podcast is for David and I to get a big enough megaphone to basically do for our grandmother, because if anybody else in this world deserves it any more than her, I don't know who, to basically get for her what, thankfully, eternally grateful to Trump for what he did for Lynn Ulbricht and the constant battle that she went to, never letting, her son fall out of the headlines, never letting him be forgotten, so that he eventually got his pardon and now he lives free today. Our grandmother was Lynn Ulbricht before Lynn Ulbricht. Our grandmother was every year when we were young.
And she wasn't the only one, too, by the way. She wasn't the only one.
Lots of POW families. I think upwards of like 2,000 to 3,000 were abandoned just in Vietnam alone, and not counting other wars, both before and after Vietnam. So she was going to Congress, testifying in front of Senate Select Committee hearings, calling her congressman, campaigning, doing everything she could to make sure that her husband, our grandfather, was never forgotten. And, I'm very happy that it turned out better for the Ulbrichts and that within Lynn's lifetime, she got to see her son free again. Unfortunately, the John McCains of the world wore people like my grandmother down in the sense that, she doesn't still do as strenuously her activism today because it's been, he was shot down in 1965. So you do the math. She's tired and just doesn't want to do it anymore. And who could blame her? She fought her fight as valiantly as anybody ever could. And if anybody deserves answers about what happened to her husband, and believe me, they know, just on the information that our family and other families have uncovered up to this point, without something like a DOGE to really lay everything bare, we know that they know. And they knew at the time when something could have been done about it, and they chose not to. So if you are a listener or viewer of this show, if you know somebody, if you're 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon from Donald Trump.
Or if you have any ideas of how we can get this in front of those people.
Because again, and here's the other last point about it, right? Is the government will tell you that the most venerated members of society are the people that give up their lives for American freedoms, right? The U.S. service personnel. And they hold them in the highest regard of anybody in society. And yet, this is how they treat them. They leave them behind, they abandon them, they cover it up, et cetera, et cetera. That's how they treat our grandfather is how they think about U.S. military service personnel. Somebody like Trump, somebody like Elon, the DOGE team, right? They don't have any skin in the game. They weren't responsible for doing to our grandfather what a lot of the people that want to keep it covered up did. So they don't have the disincentive not to release the information, just like he didn't have the disincentive not to release the JFK files, et cetera. So if anybody in our lifetime, and fortunately our grandma is still with us to be able to see it if it does happen, if anybody sitting in that Oval Office has the power to do it and the willpower to do it, it seems to be Trump. It seems to be Elon via DOGE. So again, shameless, selfish plug if we've ever given one. If nothing else good ever comes out of this podcast, if information, closure is given to our grandmother for that, this podcast will be a success beyond my wildest imagination. So, if you know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody, please put them in touch with us. We're happy to get our grandmother on the phone with you. She could give you all the receipts from day one all the way up to today. She knows where the bones are buried to the extent that anything could be known. So, if we could make that happen, it would be forever and eternally in debt to both you for making the connection and obviously for Trump for making it happen. So anyway.
And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Dang. Where can they find this episode 231 of Weapons of Meme Destruction?
You can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/231. They can get the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. They can get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. While you're over at the webpage, wmdpodcast.com, make sure to join our email list so you can always stay in contact with the show. And also check out that support our work function or tab. So you can see how to donate to us, one-time donation, $5, $10, $15 a month, whatever, works for you and your budget. Every dime is appreciated, but you can also do the free stuff. So like, subscribe, share, favorite, hit the notifications button, do all of the algo boosting things that you do on whatever platform you find us. We thank you for that. And last but not least, just tell your friends and family about us. Help grow the sane space. Yes, we think that
Queen?
our North Star being bent towards freedom deserves a larger platform for more people to hear. So hopefully more people can be free. But, we also have our personal pet projects, as anybody does. Like, as you see in David's shot right behind him there, Grandpa, and the flag that, was sent home in his stead. We have selfish motives there too, and aren't ashamed to admit those selfish motives. So anything you can do to help us grow, help get the word out there.
To be
Thank
honest
you for your
with
service.
Yeah, I don't think that's really selfish.
Well,
to
it's
say,
self-interested, right? Nobody else outside of our
self-interested, but
family
we're all-
cares about
yeah,
our family.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the POW issue, you can spread it out. Spread it out. Spread the love.
Yeah. It would help more people than just our family. Correct.
Exactly. Not just us. Exactly.
Correct.
So anyway, as Dane said, thank you for listening this far. Keep growing the sane space. And until next week, guys, stay safe. But more importantly, stay free.